Okay, I can hear it on my phone. Right, we're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to a long-awaited episode of Faith Talk. Thank you for waiting. We are 39 minutes late. I'm sorry for the technical difficulty. This is the second time ever that I'm doing YouTube live streaming, so you can understand the difficulty of me trying different software, trying this, trying that. But we're here, and this, as you know, if you've been listening to the previous episodes, this podcast is all about having honest conversations about our perspectives on faith and how faith relates to all aspects or to various aspects of life, whether it's education, creativity, industry. And today we're talking specifically about what we've all been hearing about, which is Black Lives Matter and the case of George Floyd, and where we're trying to take racial reconciliation. How are we going to approach this issue that has been centuries in the making, and specifically from a Christian standpoint, how can we make sure that there is lasting change? Because a lot of you who are watching will agree that enough is enough. We need to see change institutionally. We need to change socially. We need to see change socially. And I'm here with my friend Aaron Welsh from the same uni that I go to, University of Derby. I'll just give a backstory as to how we met. So I think it was some sort of conference happening at Kedleston Road, which is the main site for our University of Derby. Shout out University of Derby. I was a student ambassador, just working, helping out with one of the many sort of public events that the university does. That particular day, which was when was this, Aaron? Was this earlier this year or last year?
Early this year. Well, it would have been before one month. It was 22nd of October last year.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah. So further.
Still got the sticker thing.
Yeah. Oh, you still got it. Nice, nice. Yeah. But it was a whole day about decolonizing Well, it was more about addressing the attainment gap in universities. Looking at how could universities create better, more equal opportunities for BAME students, which categorize as Black and Asian and minority ethnic students. And a lot of that day was also discussing decolonizing the curriculum, which essentially means all the history that's being taught in courses. How are we making sure that they're more representative of African experiences and Asian experiences? For example, Black history shouldn't just be it shouldn't just be set to 1 month as it is Black History Month, but it should be part of the everyday curriculum and infused with all other aspects of British and European history. So that's where I met Aaron. Since then we've kind of been keeping in touch. And you're a fellow believer in Jesus as well.
Yes.
It's cool. So it was just great to meet Aaron that way. And Aaron, do you also want to share your perspective of the day, and just share like how it was like an interruption, kind of like a nice interruption to your day?
Yeah. Well,
just kind of talk about that, your experience.
Yeah. Well, I was going to the uni, to the library, just to get some books, and I'd not heard of the event, and I saw it, and I'm like, oh, can I get involved in that? Because obviously it was actually pretty close beforehand was Black History Month, and I actually was reading quite a few different books around then, and noticed that I was a bit upset really, because there wasn't much. Like, they had a sign outside saying Black Lives Matter. I mean, not Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
The Black History Month, but hadn't seen anything around. So until I did see in the bookstore there was a couple, not a massive thing, but then I saw this, I'm like, finally something I can actually see going on properly. And I hadn't been booked in before, so I wasn't sure if I could go. But I thought I might as well ask, and they welcomed me, let me in, and yeah, the day was really insightful. It
Yeah.
was yeah, especially the one where it was on about being an ally. How
Yeah.
yeah, so I learned a lot about allyship and how the best way to do it. Yeah, and
Definitely.
yeah, I met you there, met a few people there who I've seen out and about.
Yeah. So yeah, we met in this sort of in the midst of this sort of conversation, and when I first met you, Aaron, you came across as someone who was genuinely passionate about this. I think you were the only student I know of who wasn't a student ambassador, but you still you tried to get involved in the day, even though it was originally meant for members of staff from other institutions who are coming there. So it's more like a staff conference, but
Yeah,
the good thing was there were a few students who were involved in some of the workshops during the day as well. I think most of which were student ambassadors or people who did beforehand sign up, but you were like, "Nah, let's do it now,"
yeah,
even though you hadn't signed up. So yeah, you came across as someone um, who's passionate about this, and it's good because I think, especially regarding race, we need to have conversations outside of our ethnicity groups. So just introduce yourself to everyone, and what course you're studying, and kind of your just a brief history of your background, and
yeah.
um, yeah,
So,
we'll
so
just take it from there.
as you've said, my name's Aaron Welsh.
Oh, it's Aaron. It's not
Aaron,
Aaron. Aaron.
Aaron. Doesn't matter how you say
Oh, it does. Okay.
it. Yeah. So yeah, I guess a bit about me. I moved around quite a lot as a child, so I
Mm,
guess that kind of got me. I always had to get to know people.
mm,
Gave me plenty of practice to be able to get to know people and make new friendships. And
mm,
um, where I spent most of my time was in Wales. It's a pretty
mm,
white area, but I guess my mum was quite good in being inclusive and all this, so she distilled in me that kind of respect for people, no matter
mm.
what differences they have. And yeah, so currently I'm just finishing my studies as a product design engineer. So
Okay.
there's a lot of creativity that goes on.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so my religious background is in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is, like you
mm,
said, believe in Jesus Christ.
yeah.
We're Christians. Yeah, so that also distilled the respect for people of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and creeds.
Mm, okay. Awesome. And what area did you grow up in as well? Just out of
Um,
interest. So, well, what places have you lived in over your
okay,
life?
it's quite a long list. Might be people there with longer lists, but originally I was born in West Sussex. Um,
Okay.
moved to the Midlands, then moved to Wales. That's where I spent the majority of my childhood,
Mm,
and then moved to the other side of Preston kind of area, Chorley
mm,
and Preston, um, to Southport, not far from Liverpool,
mm.
and then
Okay.
back to Wales. And that actually going back to Wales at that time, I'd actually in the church I go to, we go when we're about 18, 19, we go
Mm,
on a 2-year mission where we go and
okay.
spread the gospel, teach about Jesus Christ to could be
Mm,
anywhere in the world.
mm,
And I think that's the first time that I actually, not the first time I came across other ethnicities, but being in
mm,
Wales, it's a pretty white area, especially North Wales.
mm.
Um, so that was the first place where I actually got called. You don't choose where you go to, but I got
Mm.
called to go to South Africa, which
Okay.
obviously with the history of the apartheid and things like that, and there is racial divide to
Mm,
it did open my eyes up to actually see what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And so that led me to, when I came back, I decided I wanted to be able to go somewhere that's got diversity. And so a good place to go to uni was in Liverpool, John Moores in Liverpool.
Okay, yeah.
And so shout out to anybody from Liverpool.
If they ever hear this.
Yep. So Liverpool has quite a history, which I've learnt about recently, a bit more recently.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I joined the International Society, so I was able to meet people from all kinds of backgrounds. And I guess it just grows from first just having my eyes opened, and then just continually having the desire to not just hang around people who are exactly like me.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you just go back on Chrome? Am I frozen on your screen?
No, you're not.
Okay. And check OBS as well.
OBS. It's still. Oh, you're frozen on OBS. Yeah. No, you're not. Your picture is, but yeah, your picture is.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird. Okay.
I think it might be on your side.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. But now I'm on Teams, I can see myself responding. So
yeah, it's slightly weird because I can see you moving in Chrome, but in OBS you're stuck.
Okay, you know what? Just stop the stream on OBS and then restart it, and let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you restarted the stream?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'll refresh my page and see how it's doing. And if you could also look how it looks on YouTube as well, that would be good.
Yeah, it's still frozen.
That's weird. Okay, you know what? We'll just carry on.
Yeah, they can still hear us, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, someone's commented that they can still hear us. So.
Yeah. Well, they can see me now. It's random.
You're fine. You'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll just carry on.
Okay.
Okay. So, you said you went to mission in certain countries. What specific countries did you go to?
Yeah. It was just South Africa, so Eastern and Western Cape.
Okay.
Yeah. Which seeing from one you could have a rich area and then a township right next to it was quite an eye opener.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd always seen it in like maybe books and films and things like that, but not to actually be there and see the difference. Yeah, definitely an eye opener.
Okay. So I mean, we'll talk a bit more about that. But yeah, the main thing we wanted to talk about was just the idea of racial reconciliation, understanding white privilege, and it is a thing, and that all members of the church, especially, all members of society in general, but especially the church, people who claim to be ambassadors for Jesus Christ, we also have a responsibility to make sure that, again, back to scripture where Paul talks about if one part of the church is hurting, then we should all hurt with them,
Yeah.
So what's your experience been like in terms of so would you say when you went to South Africa, um, did that broaden your perspective of um, sort of Africans and just of black people in general?
I wouldn't. I think that was kind of beforehand. I knew.
Mm.
So I'd had friends who were black or other
Mm.
ethnicities, but maybe I'd not had deep discussions into their experience and things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess from that side of it, maybe it did broaden my mind and give me more of a rounded look. Yeah.
So, and what specific things in South Africa did you learn about? Like, and what specific things, broadened your horizons on kind of South African life, but also, your perception of Africa and how it might have even benefited you as a person in terms of building your character or,
Well, I think one instance, I guess the biggest that helped me empathize, so to speak, is when we were going around, we were visiting people, teaching them in their homes, is we went to one place, this one older man, and he was telling us of what had been done to him in the past and his experience growing up in the apartheid era, and how it's not really, although they've had their kind of one level of reconciliation where they had people talking about the problems and all that it wasn't finished yet. There was a lot more that needed doing, and I feel like for me, the best thing for me to do at that point wasn't to comment, but to actually listen and just listen to everything, take it in, and not take anything personally, and listen to their experience. And I think that's kind of stuck with me, in the fact that is the first step to anything. For anybody to be able to solve a problem, you need to listen to people. You need to listen with an open heart, non-judgmental heart, and just then move on together. Kind of with the phrase, how does it go exactly? I'll paraphrase it, but when it's like, it's more important for a person to be loved than for a problem to be solved. And in that way, you're not going to have the hate towards each other. And as you do that, you'll be able to solve the problem together. There's definitely power in unity.
Definitely. What I really liked that quotation you made about, loving people is more important than always trying to find solutions, and nothing wrong with finding solutions, but I feel like a lot of the discourse that happens, especially in Britain, is that you hear all these narratives in the media about various complex issues that many black people face, such as this idea on black violence, and if Black Lives Matter is a movement, why aren't they complaining about black on black violence? And all these different narratives that are put in the media. And I feel like a lot of news outlets and institutions which do have people in high places who are still perpetuating institutional racism, and they might not even be aware of their own prejudices, but this goes to show how strong the legacy of racist ideals are, even though certain things have been abolished, such as slavery and apartheid and segregation. A lot of those things have kind of been officially or in a literal sense been eradicated, but there's mindsets that are being perpetuated. And I think it's just people need to understand that, especially a lot of white people, I from my understanding, need to be careful and make sure that they're not always trying to dictate a narrative. Accept what is happening. Learn to see the human being behind the stereotypes portrayed in the media. And when you break down those barriers, then that leads to change. Because I think a lot of people think they know the answers or think they have it all figured out, but they don't. And so let's just talk about kind of the church and how. So you said you grew up in a multi-ethnic church. Is it, or just kind of?
It is a global church.
Mm,
The local kind of congregations, it's not the most diverse,
mm,
depending where you are. Of course, you will get areas that have different. For example, in Liverpool, the branch is pretty diverse,
yeah.
and then like my branch that I grew up in Wales was majority white, if not 100% white. So you do get that kind of difference.
Okay. And how? Yeah. So just. So how did going on mission in South Africa, like, kind of, did it broaden your perspective and cultural expressions of church life? When you were in South Africa, did you go to a church there, or
Yes.
have prayer with South Africans, and did it broaden your perspective in terms of how various cultures and various people express their faith? And
Yeah, it definitely did, because when I was growing up being in Wales, where there's not really much, I mean, you pray in schools and things like that, but then there's a definite difference between the UK and South Africa as a whole.
Mm,
I feel like, although there's quite a lot of religious people in the UK, the religious aspects are a whole lot stronger in South Africa, and a lot more people are religious, whether that's Christian or other faiths.
mm. Yeah, because that's the thing. It's one thing to claim a faith. It's another thing in terms of how that manifests in your everyday life.
Yeah,
So I feel like in England, yes, historically we are a Christian nation, but we are a Western country as well. There's been all sorts of progressions with technology and schools of thought and sort of more nuanced views on spirituality in general. So I'd say a lot of people, like in England nowadays, are not religious. I think I looked at a survey recently. I can't remember the stats, but I think the vast majority of, quite a big majority of people in the UK identify as non-religious or spiritual or non-Christian or whatever. And so, I'd say now it's just more of a face value thing in England, whereas, to be honest, the same could be said for a lot of African countries, where although there might be a more strict church tradition might be more popular still.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual values of Christianity being manifested, some would say that there's still inconsistency there. Just like in every other continent in the world, there is corrupt governments in Africa, and there are still a lot of issues that need to be dealt just within the original people of Africa. So obviously, in this whole debate about racial reconciliation and not acknowledging white privilege and stuff like that, just like all human civilization, Africans have their own issues too. We're not sugarcoating it, saying that Africa is always, black people are always morally superior, because we're not. But it is still acknowledging that there are things that everyone can do, but especially white people can do to help progress things and make sure there's more sort of racial equality. You kind of I would just want to hear your thoughts generally on how you've seen the church respond to this whole Black Lives Matter thing, and what's your perspective of Black Lives Matter in general? Just your perspective in general on just the history of black people and our suffering, and how, just yeah, just share your thoughts.
Yeah, well,
I'll let you lead this.
I can kind of, going from tackling, I guess, the harsher side of it, where there's a bit more violence and things like that. Although I don't necessarily condone that action, I can understand where it's coming from, because there's been so much oppression for, well,
Yeah.
longer than our generation. You'd expect, if you're not being listened to, I mean, if you're frustrated, you can only last so long before you do start having to get your voice heard in different ways. So so for that I fully understand, and I support the movement itself. I definitely, and things do need to change, and yeah. So, I mean, the fact that there's actually a bit more support from the white people like myself, actually, maybe a good start. It might show the start of something. I think there's a lot more work to be done, and I basically 100% agree with the movement. It's definitely something that needs to be done. People may not like the fact that they're having their normal kind of challenged. For example, these statues that are getting removed. It's something that, yes, we need to remember history, but we need to remember the true history, the full history, not just the sugar-coated, we won, whatever. We're this amazing
democracy, free speech, everyone is equal. Again, relating to America, saying land of the free, home of the brave, but obviously it's not land of the free for everyone. Yeah, I see what you mean. All these cliches, people saying I'm not racist, and white people specifically, and that's not even the issue. Like, have you? I mean, I'd like some honesty, but just through the whole George Floyd, the whole George Floyd case, and you just seeing, I guess we're seeing like not a resurgence, but like there's a real outcry for justice from a wider variety of people at this time.
Yeah.
And has this season been a learning curve for you in some way, where even prior to this, you were aware of injustice, you were aware that there's institutional racism and things like the curriculum and the way police operate and all these things, they are set up to benefit white people more. You did have this knowledge already.
Yeah, I think.
But through this thing, have you learned to be maybe a little bit more sympathetic, or has it encouraged you even more to have conversations with your black members of family or black friends or anything like that?
I would say there's a few elements that have been learning, in terms of more from a historical kind of angle, and the fact that there are laws and things that I didn't know about and things like that. And I'd say it's definitely increased my passion for the topic, where beforehand I was kind of learning, like, being proactive in smaller ways, where now that...
When you say proactive in smaller ways, what are there any specific examples of that? Or?
Kind of like calling people out when they do something that's comes across as racist, or they're inconsiderate to people and their experiences, and just the smaller things, kind of like that. Just doing the small things that I can within my sphere, kind of thing. Where now that we've got this insurgence, as you say, this trend almost that's happening now, it's given that it's given a new platform to be able to do things more publicly, which with it becomes it's a bit more responsibility to continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if you don't mind me saying, you are married as well.
Yes, I am.
And have you had conversations with your wife about this as well? And in fact, if you don't mind, could we even go to the backstory of how you met her and how just your experience with her has also broadened your horizons on African identity and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I guess start with how we met. It's actually through. It's quite funny actually, because I've got a friend who I was in my ward in Liverpool, and he we were planning to go to this church activity. It's a few days long where you can go bike riding and doing various activities, dance, other kind of fun things, and then a little bit of church like scripture study and things like that. And I was in Wales, miles away. Well, not that far away from Liverpool, but yeah. So I was actually not going to go to this event, and he was messaging me saying, "Oh, yeah, you still should come." So I followed him. I went, and we have fun there. I meet Leticia. We don't think of anything of it at the time, and then I think, okay, I see her on Facebook a few times. Well, actually, maybe I should talk to her. So I talked to her. We talk about mission.
Slid in the DM.
Yeah, or DM, and then we talk about. She went on a mission too. She went to Italy, and so that got us starting. So we kind of built our relationship on God, really.
That's amazing.
And
yeah.
I think that allowed us to have more conversations and things like that.
That's good.
And we did actually have a few conversations. I know there's one time we were having a scripture study, and it was forgot where it was, but it's in the Book of Mormon, and it's Book of Mormon is what another scriptures we have alongside the Bible.
Oh, right, okay. Wait, so what denomination did you say you were again?
It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Right, okay, so that's basically the Mormon
Yes.
thing. Oh, okay, so you're a Mormon, you identify as a Mormon.
Yeah, I guess we've changed, we need to change the focus, but yeah, essentially we used to be known as Mormons.
Okay.
So it is just a nickname is that we're given.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few things that, so going back to the Book of Mormon, I had an element in there that is quite commonly misinterpreted, and it's closely related to race. And we were discussing it, and it led us onto this conversation. And I guess that was the first time we actually spoke about race as an individual kind of thing. But yeah, I guess the experience that I had previously meant I was ready for that kind of conversation.
Okay. So, wow, I never knew you identified with sort of Mormon doctrine. So, I don't want to delve too much into the history of Mormonism, but just briefly detail, when the Book of Mormon was made and what specific things does it have to say about racial integration and how it's helped you at this time in terms of knowing how to approach it.
I guess it was in the I forgot the decade, but it's in the early 1800s. That was basically the prophet Joseph Smith, who was trying to search for truth, and so he prayed about it, and he ended up getting an answer saying that he should restore his church kind of thing, and then to restore God's church, and along with that, to be able to translate an ancient record that's a history of the people in the Americas. So if you think of the Bible when it talks about other sheep that are not of his fold, that them too he must visit. This is another one of those folds, so to speak, where they were being taught the same things as in the Bible. So I guess with that in mind, it teaches the very same things as the Bible to do with racial.
But what? Okay, so because I just want to make it clear for those who live watching and listening who are not familiar with all the various sects of Christianity. Me personally, I don't really associate myself with a denomination as such.
Yeah.
The way I see it, I just read the Bible and I follow what the Bible says. I guess you could describe my experience as more Pentecostal, which kind of more relates to. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the day of Pentecost and what that means, but do you understand it, Aaron, when I say like a Pentecostal Christian or some people?
Loosely.
It's more.
Not.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, not fully.
Yeah, I mean, well, at least what I mean when I say that is just a Bible-believing Christian. We just trust the Bible, but we're quite modern in our approach to church. So the songs we sing are, quite contemporary. Might sound something like you might hear on a pop station or something, and I say that loosely because there are lots of worship songs which are very atmospheric that we sing, but the language of those songs, the instruments we use are very modern, up to date.
Like Hillsong and things like that.
Yeah, like Hillsong, Elevation Church, and all these other. So those are great examples. But I just me personally, I believe that we only need the Bible. What's your perspective of the Book of Mormon? Is it for you? Is it an essential part of being a Christian to you, or is it more of an additional help that helps you in your faith?
It's definitely, for me personally. I mean, obviously Christians believe in the Bible, so to be classed as Christian, all you need is the Bible. But the Book of Mormon to me is just as important.
Okay.
It kind of clarifies some elements, and it's been an integral part to building my testimony as it is now of Jesus Christ.
Okay. And regarding what you've read from the Book of Mormon to assist you in how to approach racial reconciliation, are there any specific bits that you can remember, an example that you can give?
Off the top of my head,
sorry if I'm throwing you in the deep end.
I wasn't actually.
I'm not trying to show you up or anything.
Oh, no worries. I wasn't prepared for Book of Mormon parts.
It's okay.
But just trying to think now. I've gone blank. I'm sorry. I can always come back and talk about it if you wanted.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, again, I wasn't originally planning to speak about Mormonism, but since you brought it up, I thought let's try and tie it in. But yeah, no worries. I had a few scriptures from the Bible to share, which have helped me personally in terms of understanding God's heart for justice. And I just wanted to bust some myths, because even unfortunately Christianity has a tainted past in terms of its representation in Western society. A lot of slave masters and colonial people did claim Christianity, and they used their Christianity to justify slavery, which obviously doesn't make sense if you are a genuine believer, reading the word, seeing how God delivered the children of Israel who were like his chosen nation. And the Israelites for a time, if you read in the book of Genesis, they were in slavery themselves. They were slaves to the Egyptians. And we've all heard the stories of Moses, and God's using Moses to take the Israelites out of slavery and deliver them into freedom. And even within that specific example, there's so much depth to it, and how many parallels it has to the Black experience today. Because I think as Moses himself, he was born Hebrew, so he was born as an Israelite. But I think around the time he was born, Hebrew baby boys were being, I think, massacred by the Egyptians.
Yes.
I might be a bit rusty on my memory, but that's kind of basically what happened. And so I think Moses' mother, or Keresh, he put him in a basket and put him on a river, hoping that he would survive and land in a safe place.
And he does. Ends up
and
and
then he was picked up by what was it? There were some women from I think Egyptian women.
The daughter of the Pharaoh, I think, was one of them.
So he grew up in a privileged background. He did come from a group of marginalized people, which there are some correlation there with the Black experience as well. And then, but he did grow up in the house of Pharaoh. He grew up in a privileged position. So and that's just one example of many people in the Bible who had like a split identity. They grew up in one area and they moved to another area where they had a different experience. The same could be said for Joseph, if you remember the story of Joseph. His brothers were, long story short, his brothers were jealous of him because their father, Jacob, was very favorable. Was it Jacob? I think I'm getting the words.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, yeah. Jacob, who was very favorable to his youngest son, Joseph. His older brothers got jealous, threw him in a ditch. Long story short, he got sold in as a slave, and he was moved to Egypt as well. And he was found favor in the eyes of the Pharaoh at the time. And then, he got marginalized by them, got thrown in prison. So both Moses and Joseph, they had ways of interpreting the world in different cultural things. They came from one area. They saw their people being manipulated, but they also had places of authority. I guess they had their own privilege in a sense. And they had the challenge of risking their privilege, even though they found favor in Egyptian society, got to higher rankings, that they still saw the oppression of their own people, the people they came from originally, the Israelites. And they both were willing to use their platforms. Moses really had to reject it because he saw a fellow Israelite being, you can read about this in either Genesis or Exodus, but he saw an Israelite getting beaten by an Egyptian. He was angry.
Yeah.
He beat the Egyptian, and then he became, okay, I have to live life on the run now because, I guess the Egyptians aren't for me anymore. So, I mean, that's a radical example, but there were various things.
Yeah, there's definitely
these people are willing to do.
And I think that's a common occurrence where Jesus Christ is asking us to give up the worldly riches, whatever that is, whether that's the privilege or physical means, to follow him. I mean, I forgot his name, but the guy, the rich man that came to Jesus Christ, he was like, what can I do more? And he said, sorry, and then he tells him, sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. And in that case, it was one where it made him sad because, I have to give all this up. But yeah, but there's many other examples where they do give up what they have, and they're blessed for it. It may not be in a physical sense, but
Yeah.
in a more long-term sense,
Yeah.
definitely there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also, again, in regards to Jesus, what he talked about. He talked to the rich man who said, I think he said, it's easier for you to get through the eye of a needle than
Yes.
for you as a rich man to inherit the kingdom of God. Jesus wasn't saying this just bad in general to be rich.
No.
He's not saying that. He's saying, if you let these riches be the source of your identity and you make it, if you worship money more than God,
Exactly.
then that's when you can't really inherit the kingdom of God. So Jesus, and another thing that shows that Jesus came to preach a message of reconciliation between different cultures, between different backgrounds, is through the Samaritan woman, him meeting the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of churches in America, and just a lot of churches in general, have been speaking about this story in regards to recent sermons about the current time that we're living in. A lot of pastors, and that's a good thing about that I'm seeing as well. I'm seeing a few white influential pastors as well. I'm not sure if you follow Hillsong, but Hillsong New York, Carl Lentz is a popular a pastor who he has quite a big global reach in terms of his influence, and he's been just pouring his heart out. He's been speaking about racial issues already, but especially at this time he's been interviewing other influential black pastors as well, like T.D. Jakes, and also Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church. He's also been having great discourse about this issue. There's another pastor I follow who is black, Michael Todd, who a few years ago he talked about racial reconciliation, and he preached a message from John chapter 4. And so basically, just to set the context, Jesus was going about doing his work, healing people and preaching the good news that he had come to save people from their sin, save people from the consequences of their sin, which is, eternal death. It's not God sending people to hell because he wants to send people to hell. It's because hell is literally a place where we are separated from God. And if we choose not to accept God into our lives, we are in essence denying him, and hell is just an absence of his supervision. That's all it is. And we are choosing that when we go away from him. But anyway, Jesus came to preach about that. He had to go to, so if you go to John chapter 4, verse 3, so he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. So at the time, Jewish people would avoid going through Samaria to get to Galilee. Samaria was this place where they didn't want to associate with the Samaritans. Samaritans, again, there's some parallel with the black experience in terms of how they've been marginalized, and how there was still some racial tension going on, I guess you could say, between the Jews and the Samaritans, even though the Samaritans did still believe in I think the Torah, which is like the Old Testament. I think it was like the first 4 or 5 books that they also agreed on, but the rest of the Torah, that's where they had differences with the Jews. But anyway, Jesus did a bold thing, and he walked through Samaria, which Jewish people would not have done. And even more amazingly, he speaks to a Samaritan woman. The way he even approaches the woman is he doesn't come as this superior person saying, I'm more important than you, which, it has been an issue in the Western church. And again, not all white people, a few white people have, when it comes to helping people, or when it comes to, there's this superior complex of like, I'm here to help you and I know more than you, which, is another institutional thing that needs to be broken down. And I'd encourage, again, just like what Aaron has said earlier, just try and be understanding of people's experiences. Try not to always come in with, oh, here's how I can help you. How can people of ethnic minority also help you in your walk with God? You know, what insights do they have that they can draw from their culture to also help you in your spiritual journey? And so Jesus came in, he came to terms with the woman. He was like, can I have a drink? He was just relating with where the woman was. In fact, I'll just read it in the verse 7. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? In brackets, the writer puts, his disciples had gone into the town to buy some food. Verse 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with the Samaritans. Verse 10, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. So that's deep, right? Another thing was when Jesus was speaking, he wasn't always talking about literal things, right? So he's saying, I am the living water. I am the Messiah. That's what he's saying to this woman, that the water is a metaphor for all the things we try and get in life to satisfy us. You know, we try and get money to satisfy us, relationships to satisfy us, but none of those things will satisfy us the way God can satisfy us.
No.
And Jesus was saying, I am the Messiah. I am God in the flesh. God is, we as Christians, and I'm sure you can agree, we believe in the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And Jesus was the Son manifestation of God. And yes, Jesus is saying to this woman, you know, I can satisfy you. And then the woman says, verse 15, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And then verse 16, he told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. So you can just imagine the woman being like, oh my days, there's something special about this guy. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus said, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Jesus himself was a Jew. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. So Jesus, in essence, is saying, don't worry about your conceptions of the traditional places where you worship God. A time is coming, and what he meant was now, like me, Jesus, I have come so that through my death and resurrection, the Holy Spirit, the third person of God, will come to all people, and you can experience my presence anywhere in the world. Okay? So this is what relates it back to the whole idea of reconciliation of various cultures and races in the body of Christ, where it doesn't matter if you're Ethiopian in a local church, you can still experience God in the same way as a white person in an English church, you know.
Yeah,
location,
I
culture is not a boundary, you know, and Jesus was making it clear here.
Yeah.
And the woman in verse 25 says, wow, I know that, she says, the woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then Jesus drops the ball and says, I, the one speaking to you, I am he, right? So the amazing thing was, when I heard the sermon from Michael Todd about this, he made some things clear which jumped out to me, is that in regards to racial reconciliation, Jesus was, I guess, in the place of privilege, right? And you can relate this to, again, not all white people. I'm not going to generalize and say all white people are very privileged. No, there are poor white people. There are some white people who you might compare to a more privileged black person and say, actually, the black person in this predicament seems more privileged than them. You know, it's a case-by-case thing, but in the general picture is white people, at least, they're not being discriminated because of their color. there are various types of marginalizations that happen. There's sexism that happens. There's LGBTQ discrimination that happens. But when you look at the broader picture of white society and white history, in comparison to black history, they do have more privilege going on for them. So it's looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And Jesus, from his privileged position, the good thing is he didn't hide who he was. The woman could still see he was a Jew, right? And you do have some white people who their intentions are pure, but they might try a little bit too hard to try and relate with black culture. So in their attempt to try and stand up for black culture, they say, oh, I love hip hop music. I'm really understanding of hip hop culture. And,
Yeah, not realizing that that's a very narrow view of.
Yeah, and it's like some white people, they do want to try and understand black people, but they try and pretend to be someone that they're not in order to be down with the crew or whatever.
Yeah.
But Jesus, he's being himself. He's unapologetically a Jew. So just being honest about who you are is one step in racial reconciliation. But also, again, like I said earlier, he's relating with the woman. He's able to drink from the same cup as the woman. So when Jesus was asking for a drink, he was inferring at that time to be drinking from the same cup as the woman when she was fetching from the well. And even the geographical location is a huge indication, because the well was known as Jacob's well, right? And Jacob was an ancestor in Israeli history that both Jews and Samaritans agreed with. Yeah. So Jesus met the woman on common ground in terms of what she believed. And when we have these conversations about racial reconciliation, we need to try and meet in the middle ground. Yes, we have differences. You might look up to Mark Zuckerberg or Winston Churchill. I might look up to Tupac. I might look up to other people who in Western media have been, portrayed to be as, oh, they're a bad influence, they're into violence, or even people like Malcolm X, they have a complex identity in Western media. Some people say that he was an extremist, or he was this, he was that. And as a black person growing up, our heroes might be very different from your heroes, but then the common ground is, okay, we are both human beings. We both want the best for our families. Especially in Christianity, we do believe we do read the same scriptures. So we need to meet on common ground and say, what are the things we have in common, and start from there. Don't start from differences and saying, oh, I have my difference, I have your difference. And then we just start debating straight away. No, we are human beings. We have families. We have experiences. We all fall in love. We all go through identity crisis. Yeah. We all have our teenage moments when in our teenage years we try different things. All these relatable life experiences.
I think that is one of the big keys, because if you're not knowing each other's similarities and that human side of us, then you're not going to understand in the same way as if you're like, oh, they're different to us, then you're othering them, and then dehumanizing, and then it becomes so much easier to, like you say, debate and just think you're the one who's right. You need to teach this person this, when in fact, you find your similarities, and you learn from them, they learn from you, and that is different perspectives can bring strength into life.
And so I could keep going through that chapter, but basically there's the local community to the woman. Her community ends up being saved. Their community ends up encountering the love of Jesus and eternal salvation. And what I've been thinking is, Jesus had to step outside of his comfort zone. He grew up as a Jew, and he had to go to this town where, obviously he was God, so in a sense he did know the future and how people would respond.
That is somewhere, I guess, talk about similarities. We have all these similarities. The difference But I believe is that there were actually three different people. So you've got the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost as three separate beings. But like you say, the similarities are there, that we still follow Jesus Christ, we still follow God,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
still have all these similarities.
Yeah, and the Samaritans wouldn't have heard the gospel if Jesus wasn't willing to step outside his comfort zone. And what I'm thinking is, are there certain communities today where it's predominantly ethnic minority, where certain white people or more privileged people in the church, they haven't become fully sensitive to other cultures, or two, they do have good intentions, but they're scared that if they go into certain settings, if they talk to certain people from certain backgrounds, that they might be rejected, or they won't understand them, or they feel like as a white person, this group of black people or this group of young people might not want to listen to me because I don't really relate with them, and they might, all these little fears that we might have that stop us from sharing the gospel. Those can actually be big barriers. And if there's anything to learn from this period, is that saying something is better than saying nothing.
Yeah, because at least
even as a white person, you might not feel like you have the right words to start the conversation about trying to understand why black people are so hurt by the injustices caused. It's still worth saying something,
Yeah, definitely.
And
I mean,
because Jesus said something, a whole town was able to experience salvation and freedom in him. So it's, again, looking at the bigger picture of we, as especially if you're a white Christian, the calling is bigger than your fears. Don't let your fears of racial or cultural difference stop you from being a light to other people. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to share as well. And I'll let you add anything else.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking on the lines that if you see something as bigger than yourself, in a way, if you think of Jesus Christ himself, he atoned for our sins, he went through all that pain, didn't just do it for him, he did it because he knew it was bigger than him, that it was to save everyone. Whether they accept it, that's a different thing, but that whole element of remembering that things are bigger than them, if you go and there is something that needs to be said, you might not have the perfect words for it. You might make mistakes on the way. I know I haven't been perfect. I've said things that weren't necessarily meant in a bad way, but then they've come across. But then that gives us opportunities to grow, because then if we've started that conversation and someone says, "Hey, actually, I think you're wrong there. This is the truth," and then you actually go, "Aha, okay, this is true." Doesn't mean you've changed as a person. It just means you're improving yourself, and you're going to grow as a person, and hopefully that fact that you're growing yourself and learning will be a good example to those around you, and they might make the same growth.
Yeah, definitely. This conversation is going pretty long, so let's try and go into the final topic, which is the way forward. So just in regards to your experience with your church, firstly, how has your bond with your church been during lockdown, and have you still been having online services?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly enough, I think it was early last year, we started a new kind of not curriculum, would it be called curriculum? Yeah, I guess in a way, where it's focusing on home-centered, church-supported kind of curriculum, to be able to give you more, a stronger kind of independence, I guess. So you can build that testimony yourself, your strength you can build, and the church is supported. So the fact we moved over to that with lockdown, the fact we can't actually go, means that we don't necessarily have to meet as often. We can, this, we can have Zoom meetings and online meetings, but it has given that extra freedom to be able to learn for ourselves instead of being taught to, I guess, in a way. You go for
Yeah,
it.
and in regards to the Christian experience in general,
Yeah.
we're encouraged to be. I feel like 2020 as a Christian for me has been a big challenge to be proactive in the kingdom of God.
Definitely.
You know, whether it's being proactive in my own spiritual life or being proactive in the issues that are happening in the world in
Yeah.
terms of, this is a great time as a Christian to share the hope you have in Jesus to
Yeah.
other people, your non-believing friends who might be like, all the stuff I trusted in, like my education, my social life, going out, clubbing, all these everyday things that we put our identity in. All those things have been crashing down.
Yeah. So you
Stock
come into
market
that
is
heart
crashing. Yeah,
of
so
what really.
people are looking for hope, like more than ever. So that's
Yeah.
we're being more encouraged as Christians to be proactive in that area, but also in the area of racial reconciliation,
Yeah.
being honest about our own sort of prejudices,
Yeah.
and even for me, I'm taking this as a challenge to not always speak to the same people who have interests as me. If we're going
Yeah.
to move things forward and um, destabilize the prejudice norms of
Yeah.
in society, it all starts with us. Are we being intentional about our friendships? Are we trying to form more friends who are outside our ethnicities and outside our cultures? And so it's a challenge for me. I want to have more conversations with people like you, Aaron, and speak to more people and be more open to people who don't have the same interests as I do. And yeah, I think that's one big step forward.
Yeah. I definitely feel that this lockdown has actually been able to almost be a catalyst in being able to have those conversations, because people aren't preoccupied with
That's a
all
good
these
point.
extra things
Yeah.
that they did. So
Yeah.
it's a perfect time to get started, then continue as lockdown
Yeah.
breaks up and we get back to the norm. Hopefully we'll be able to have, now that the conversation has started with many people, to continue that discussion and continue to improve.
Yeah.
And be able to make those changes that are needed.
Yeah. And for you, in your personal experience, has your church talked about the issue of not just George Floyd and how he was taken out, but just the history of injustice, being sensitive to the experiences of black people in this country where, for instance, most white people might be able to get a certain loan, and for a black person, it might not be as easy as them because there's still people in high places looking at black people having certain perceptions and saying, oh, black people, they're not good at managing money, so I don't think they should do this. Or, all these messages that we don't talk about, but they're in the media. So has your church started to have that conversation a bit more?
Yeah, so our current prophet, President Nelson, he has actually, over the last 2 years, been working alongside the NAACP to be able to bring this up and to improve the way things are, whether in and outside of the church, because obviously just because you are Christian doesn't mean you don't have those prejudices and you don't have those traits that maybe aren't helping the situation.
Yeah. And so, for instance, was it brought up in one of your online? Do you still do online services every Sunday?
Not every Sunday at the moment.
Okay.
We have them on and off kind of thing.
Okay. And so the issue has been brought up in sort of your online fellowship yet, or it hasn't been brought up yet?
So on a worldwide scale, it has. On a local area, we're beginning to have more discussions.
Okay.
Which,
Okay, that's good.
There's definitely room for improvement, and and I know the local leaders do want to have more conversations, like with the youth, for example.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely the way forward. Is even for my church, I'll be shout out Derby City Church. That's my home church. Great community there. There is quite a lot of diversity. It is a white majority church, but
Yeah.
again, loads of Africans there, a lot of West Africans especially, and we have an African Connect group as well that we have fortnightly. So, in
Yeah.
terms of cultural integration, I think the church is doing a great job, and I feel at home there. I feel like I can be myself, my full self.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think was it last Sunday or the Sunday before? I can't remember. It was brought up briefly. We had a prayer at the start of the service. So again, I appreciate that. Some churches have gone even beyond that and dedicated the majority of their service to speaking on that specific issue
Yeah.
of racial injustice and what the church can do to empower people. So yeah, from what I'm seeing, a lot of churches are really being more
Yeah.
intentional about this conversation and not shying away from it.
No.
And yeah, again, like you said, hopefully we'll keep going that way after lockdown. And yeah, are there any sort of final words of encouragement you want to give
Some
people
final
watching?
words.
And from your experience, what do you think? How would you like to encourage like other white people in general to
I would say,
play their part, and especially white Christians?
I guess I would say, if you feel uncomfortable at the start, just work through it, because I mean, it's not going to be easy for everybody. It is a learning curve, and if you do say the wrong thing, and then just allow yourself to be corrected, and don't take it personally. Just take it as an opportunity to grow and be able to help those around you, and just continue to educate ourselves, whether we're black, white, or any other ethnicity. Just continue learning and growing.
Yeah. And what I'd also say as well, I think I posted about this on Facebook already, but just basically, everyone has their part to play. Again, white people, I love white people, I love white culture. I love seeing diversity in the church. Let's not just tolerate each other's cultures, and let's actually
Definitely
celebrate.
not.
That's where the
that
difference
is
needs
key.
to be
That
seen.
is
Is having an open approach instead.
Yeah.
So if you're a youth leader, for example, in a church, and there's a certain demographic of young people that you want to reach, whether it's a certain ethnicity or certain background they're coming from, don't see it as, oh, I just have to tick this off. No, this is for you. This is the heart of what it means to be a believer, first and foremost. But it's also, you also have something to gain from it. When you see your ethnic minority friend being teased, or one of your other friends are giving comments that are racially ignorant, when you challenge those things, you're helping yourself as well, because you're empowering yourself to have more dynamic relationships, and all your relationships in general will thrive because you're opening yourself to people from other cultures and standing up for them. It builds your character as well. So everyone has something to gain from it. My advice to fellow black people would be, yes, that I get your pain, but let's not let our anger cloud our vision. And here's another reason why I'm a Christian, because I'll just be very honest. If I based my identity on what Western society says about black people, I'll be very honest. That's not a great place to get my identity from, because it's it is what it is. We have a history of stereotypes and misunderstandings against us, and it's like, if I base my identity on that, that's going to be quite hard for me, So all I can say is it's my faith in God that keeps me going. When the society around me makes me feel marginalized and alienated, I know that the one who created me gave me a purpose. He gave me this skin color for a reason. He gave me my ethnicity for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's and it's not just for the black experience. Any person, whether you have a disability, whether you're a certain height, color, whether you're Asian, whatever the unique thing is about you, you can have faith that, God has given you that thing for a reason. There's other people who have that as well, and God can use that as a way for you to reach them as well. So, just one thing I want people to get away from this conversation is that faith affects everything, even the way we relate to each other racially. Thanks Aaron for this.
Yeah, thank
Final
you
point.
for
Are there
inviting
any?
me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
I'll just say thank you for inviting me to do this
Mm.
podcast.
No problem. No
Been
problem. It's been a pleasure,
pretty
man.
good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any books you're reading that is helping you just in general in terms of educating yourself on the Black experience and Black history, or are there? Yeah.
Yeah, there's been quite a few. There's the one I'm reading at the moment. I'm halfway through. Is Akala's Natives.
Yep. I've nearly finished reading that book.
Yeah, it's a
So,
great
yeah.
book. Yeah, and also Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
Mm.
By
Yeah. Awesome.
René Edelarch. That's the one.
Awesome. I've got another book which is specifically written by a London pastor. He's a Black pastor,
Oh, yes.
Ben Lindsay.
Ben Lynn.
I reckon, yeah, Ben Lindsay. I'm gonna get his book actually. Hang on one sec. Okay, so here's the book. We need to talk about race, and so it's very specific to the British Black experience, which is great. So I think it's a great resource for you to buy. It's on Amazon. We need to talk about race. The blurb says, from the UK Church's complicity in the transatlantic slave trade to the whitewashing of Christianity throughout history, the Church has a lot to answer for when it comes to race relations.
Yeah.
Christianity has been dubbed the white man's religion, yet the Bible speaks of an impartial God and shows us a diverse body of believers, which I briefly touched on through my scripture reading. So, great book. I finished reading it. I'm going to read it again. And the good thing is, after every chapter, there's a section called For Your Consideration. So it's got some practical questions for the person of color, a white church leader, and a white church member.
Yeah.
So there's always reflective questions at the end of every chapter for those.
That sounds like a really good book, actually.
Yeah, so I thoroughly recommend it. And I think there's loads of other books out there regards to specifically Christianity and racial reconciliation.
Yeah. I've got 3 books here that are the same way they're based for the UK experience.
Yeah. I saw Black and British by David Olusoga.
Yes. I've not read this one yet, but I've watched his documentary that's based on this.
Yeah, I watched it as well.
It's a great documentary, but I'll be reading that soon. But sorry? Yeah, my wife's reading it at the moment.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's good. So thank you very much for your time, Aaron. I'm going to stop it there. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm just going to keep in touch with you, just see how you're doing, and hopefully we can encourage each other as well in our faith and in the way we're approaching, sort of reconciliation. But yeah,
definitely.
So everyone who's listening, thank you for staying in tune. I'm going to check the chat and see if there's any questions.
Don't see any.
Probably no questions at the moment as of the time we're recording, but that's okay. Okay, so Hubert is saying, thank you, Aaron and Nath. That discussion was really refreshing indeed. We all have a part to play in order to make a difference and bring about sustainable racial reconciliation indeed. Thank you, Hubert. Yeah. Did I say that correctly? Is it Hubert, Hubbard? I don't know. Hubert, yeah. So that's awesome. Thank you. And whoever the other 3 people are who are watching at the moment, or 5 rather. Again, I appreciate small beginnings. So I hope one day this podcast will just be much more popular and reach much more people. And then people can go back through the archive and see these conversations. So, thank you, Aaron, for how many people could be hearing
It's been great. Like you say, small beginnings. This is actually the first ever podcast I've ever took part in. So
nice.
Not done
it's been a pleasure.
Like cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So with that being said, goodbye, Aaron. And to you guys who are watching as well, I've got some news regarding my music as well. You've just started following me on Instagram, Aaron. So I'd recommend go through my feed. You see, there's other things I'm working on. I've started releasing music as well. Are you much of a rap fan at all?
I wouldn't say it's my go-to,
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
I do have my times when I do go and listen to some.
Okay.
But
So I mean, I do rap music, but I mean, I do spoken word as well. So I've released a
yeah,
spoken word single and a song as well. I've got a new one coming out this coming Friday, and it's available for pre-order. So if you go on my Instagram bio link, you can see the pre-order button there. And the song is called My Formula. I just want to encourage you guys. Just go to my Instagram bio link. My username is Nathadai, NATH_ADDAI. The Instagram bio link is there. You can pre-order the single and pre-save it. And yeah, it's just a fun sort of rap song. It's quite upbeat, but it is just talking about the simplicity that I have in life, where all I need is my faith in God and basic resources like a laptop, and that's all I need to really make good content and to impact people, which is what I'm doing with this podcast. I don't have a fancy microphone or anything. We did have a lot of technical issues earlier, so
got through
I
it.
don't have a lot, but the main thing is making the most of what you have, and that's what the song is about. It's just, this is my simple formula to being the person God's called me to be. I just have these simple resources. So yeah, thanks for that, guys, and we're out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Aaron, for your time. Bye, guys. So if you just click